Welcome to today's training video where we will go over the different processes to administer the Chafee Grant on WebGrants. This is our agenda for today. We will go over an overview of the Chafee Grant, the payment roster, how to certify eligibility and ineligibility, the student application status screen, and finally, how to disperse or return payments. Let's begin with an overview of the Chafee Grant program. Administered by the Commission through an interagency agreement with the California Department of Social Services, or CDSS, the Chafee Grant pays $5,000 annually to help foster youth pay for college or career technical training. The Chafee Grant is also federally and state funded, which is subject to annual availability of funds. Now, to be eligible for the Chafee Grant, students must be a current or former foster youth living in foster care for at least 1 day between the ages of 16 and 18 years old. Kin-Yap, non-related legal guardianship, and adoptions are unfortunately not eligible. Students must also be under age 26 at the start of the award year on July 1st. And finally, students have up to 5 years to participate in the Chafee Grant, and any payment greater than $1 counts as 1 year of paid participation. Participation does not have to occur in consecutive academic years, so students who want to put the award on hold should work with their financial aid office to suspend payments for a future term or school year. Now, there are several aspects about the Chafee Grant that make it very different from other traditional financial aid. Since the Chafee Grant is both federally and state funded, and because it falls under the umbrella of Health and Human Services, Chafee funds are not earmarked specifically for tuition and fees or even books and supplies. In fact, Chafee funds can be used towards rent or housing, transportation, childcare, or towards grad school or teacher certification. Additionally, the Chafee Grant is the only California aid award that is payable at qualifying out-of-state colleges. Now, there is a priority awarding hierarchy when disbursing Chafee funds. To be prioritized in that awarding hierarchy, students must first fulfill all 3 application components. First, they must submit a FAFSA or a CADA every year. Second, they must submit a Chafee Grant application only 1 time. And third, they must have their foster youth status verified by CDSS. Once they have fulfilled those components, the first set of students to be awarded on the hierarchy are paid renewal students, which are students that previously received a Chafee payment. Next to be awarded are new applicants and non-paid renewal students who will be 25 years old as of July 1st of the award year. Next are non-paid renewal students, and finally the last to be paid are new applicants under the age of 25. This hierarchy demonstrates that the Chafee Grant operates using recycled funds. Eligible students who are not awarded in the year they apply are waitlisted until they rise towards the top of the awarding hierarchy. As financial aid staff certify ineligible students who are not in attendance, not attending at least half-time, or are not making satisfactory academic progress, those awards will be withdrawn from ineligible students and recycled and re-awarded to waitlisted students. The CSAC website for college staff has a dedicated link about the Chafee program and contains program documents such as the Chafee Coordinator's Guide, the Payment Quick User Guide, an FAQ about the Chafee Grant for institutions, and another FAQ about SB 150 Satisfactory Academic Progress, which we will explain briefly later in the presentation. And before we dive right into the different processes on how to administer the Chafee program, in WebGrants you can find all of the Chafee screens under the Chafee banner. This presentation will cover the student application status screen, the institution reconciliation screen, and the payment roster screen. Let's begin with the payment roster screen. It is important to note that schools need to certify both eligible and ineligible students. The viability of the Chafee Grant relies on recycled funds, so it is essential that we keep funds continually moving by withdrawing and recycling those funds to waitlisted students every week. You do that by certifying ineligible students every week for every term, which will then initiate the recycling process and help other students get paid. A final note to reiterate before we leave this slide is to remember to certify and request a payment in the same transaction, since only one transaction is permitted each week. Remember to report ineligibility for students who are either not enrolled, attending less than half-time, completed their program or degree, or are not making SAP. Once again, reporting ineligibility is what triggers our system to recycle those funds to another waitlisted student. So if you do not certify your roster to report both eligible and ineligible students, the entire recycling and reawarding process is disrupted. The following information shows how many days schools have to certify eligibility from the time the student is first awarded their Chafee Grant Award. Schools have 30 days to certify student eligibility for fall and winter terms, 21 days during the spring term, and 14 days during the summer. Now, the impact of failing to certify your students is immense, as it causes delays to eligible students awaiting their payments. And since Chafee funds can also be used towards payments for things other than tuition, such as rent, transportation, or childcare, any delay in receiving funds will negatively impact your students' ability to pay for them. In other words, not certifying your roster even if your student is ineligible also negatively impacts other eligible waitlisted students. So make sure you are working your roster every week to keep those Chafee funds moving. Now let's take a look at the 5 different Chafee Award statuses. All eligible students are placed on the school roster whether they've been awarded or not. Users can click Search to see all award statuses, or you can choose to view a specific award status. Awarded means a student has a preliminary award offer. Once eligibility has been certified and payment has been requested by the college, a check will be sent. Eligible not awarded means a student is eligible for the Chafee Grant but has not yet been awarded. In other words, this student is lower on the priority awarding scale and is waitlisted. This student will eventually be awarded, but it may not be until the next academic year. Pending means there's a pending transaction that will process Monday evening. Paid in full means the student was paid for all eligible terms, and again, the maximum Chafee award is $5,000 per year. And finally, not awarded shows a list of students marked as ineligible for Chafee. A good rule of thumb is to work the roster every Tuesday to check for newly awarded students, as recycled funds are processed every Monday night. Now let's take a look at the 5 sections of the Chafee payment roster. First is the payment roster details section, which displays student demographic information imported from the student's FAFSA or CADA. Next is the ineligible section, used specifically to report annual level ineligibility. Next is the eligible section, used to report term level eligibility or ineligibility. You'll notice several pre-populated fields. Those in white can be overwritten if data needs to be modified, such as education level or SAI. Next is the request payment section, where schools select the term or terms for which the student is eligible for payment. And lastly, we have the reminders or resources section, where you will find the Chafee Quick User Guide, a very helpful resource that outlines nearly every payment scenario, including how to report ineligibility at the term level and at the annual level. Next, let's take a look at how to certify students for eligibility. To be eligible for payment, students need to be enrolled in a program of at least 1 year in duration, attend at least half-time, and make SAP based on the new SB 150 provisions. More on that later, but John Burton Advocates for Youth, or JBAY, has put together a toolkit and other related documents. We highly recommend reviewing these materials for details around SB 150. And to request payments, schools should request payments for all eligible terms, and don't forget to save each transaction. We will show you that process in the next slide. Within 3 to 4 days, the State Controller's Office will process and transfer Chafee funds. In a later slide, we will go over the student application status screen, which displays the claim schedule information. Now, this is the section of the roster where eligibility is certified for awarded students. Note that there is no need to certify eligibility for students who are not yet awarded or are in the eligible not awarded roster. Certifying the roster for students who are still waitlisted creates rework because you will end up having to recertify and request payment once the student is actually awarded. Let's take a look at a few of these sections. Terms attending, these boxes are pre-populated based on your school's term schedule. You can see that this screenshot is from a semester school because 2 terms, fall and spring, are pre-populated. In most cases, you will not need to check or uncheck any of these boxes. The only time you would uncheck a term attending box is to report ineligibility for that term. Next is education level. This is based on what was self-reported by the student on their FAFSA or CADA. You should update per your institution's EL policy. And finally, request payment. The bottom section of the roster is where schools request payments. Request payments for all open terms for which your student is eligible. Certifying eligibility and requesting payment should be done at the same time, as a roster only allows 1 transaction per week. If you certify the eligible section before requesting payment, you will have to wait until the following Tuesday to request payment. Once you click Save, ensure that your screen displays the Transaction Saved Successfully pop-up. As you're attempting to pay students, you'll notice that some of the checkboxes next to the academic terms are grayed out and will not allow a payment to be requested. This is for one of 3 possible reasons. First, that term may not be applicable to your school. For example, a semester school with fall and spring terms will not be able to request payment for winter term. Another reason may be that the roster is not yet open for that term. The dates that appear in parentheses are the dates those terms will open for payment. Or finally, you might have unchecked a term box in the terms attending section of the roster, thereby reporting that your student is not eligible for payment for that term. Now that we've seen how to report eligibility, let's take a look at how to report and recycle funds for ineligible students. Now, there are more eligible Chafee applicants than there are Chafee funds, which is why we need to continually recycle funds from ineligible students and put them into the hands of eligible waitlisted students. When reporting annual level ineligibility, choose just one of the 4 possible options. This will make the student ineligible for the remainder of the award year unless the school reinstates the award. Remember, if reporting a student as ineligible due to not maintaining SAP, be sure to comply with the relaxed SAP provisions under SB 150. More on that in a later slide. Now in this example, the student was reported as not enrolled. Since the student was not enrolled at the start of the school year, this is an appropriate use of annual level ineligibility. However, if the student attends later in the same fall term, simply uncheck the ineligible reason and click Save to put them back into the pool for award consideration. Typically, students will be re-awarded the following week. Now let's take a look at how to report term level ineligibility. To do so, simply uncheck the box for the corresponding term in the Terms Attending section and click Save. In this example, the fall term was unchecked, which means that the $2,500 that had been held in reserve for this student for the fall term will instead be recycled to the next waitlisted student. It's really that easy. Let's say the student regains eligibility later in the same fall term. Just recheck the fall terms attending box, recalculate cost of attendance, SAI, and other aid as needed, and click Save. This will reinstate the student's award and will put them back into the pool of other eligible students. WebGrants will then reprioritize them based on the awarding hierarchy, and in most cases, the student is re-awarded the following week. Before making a student ineligible for SAP, please review the new softened SAP policy under SB 150. SB 150 went into effect on January 1, 2020, and allows students to receive Chafee grants for up to 2 years before becoming ineligible due to not meeting SAP by creating an educational plan that directs students to on-campus services such as tutors. In addition, students who are in jeopardy of losing the Chafee grant due to SAP must be given the option to appeal. Colleges will end up creating 2 SAP policies, one for Chafee recipients, the other for all other students. While this presentation does not discuss SB 150 in greater detail, schools are expected to comply with the new provisions. Therefore, college staff should review the new law to draft an updated SAP policy specific to the Chafee grant. The link to the general special alert about SB 150 is provided at the bottom of the slide. In this next section, we will introduce the student application status screen. Many financial aid administrators only use the payment roster in WebGrants, but familiarizing yourself with this screen is extremely beneficial. The Student Application Status screen has three sections: Demographics, Application Status, and Correspondence. The Demographics section includes the student's name, date of birth, address, and the college of attendance. The Application Status is where WebGrants users can easily see at a glance with green check marks whether all three application requirements were met. You can also view the application status, such as new applicant, non-paid renewal, and paid renewal. You could also see school certifications and payments. Finally, Correspondence Records allows you to see the various correspondence records that have been sent to the student, as well as school changes and even CSAC recycled awards. If a student has any missing items to complete, they will be marked by a yellow exclamation point. This screenshot tells us that foster care has not been verified, so the foster care verification form is required. Have the student send the form to the county caseworker, probation officer, or independent living program coordinator. You can find the foster care verification form on our CSAC website. On the same application status screen, you can also see other important dates. In the green section, we can see that the student was preliminarily awarded for the Chafee Grant on August 19, 2024. In the blue section, we see that the school certified eligibility for the fall term on September 10, 2024. Again, schools have 30 days from the time the student is first awarded to certify eligibility for fall term. And finally, in the red section, we see that the payment was issued to the institution on September 20th, 2024. This same payment process is repeated each term. The final step in the Chafee process is to report all Chafee checks that your campus receives, whether dispersed to the student or returned to the commission. We will see this process done using the institution reconciliation screen. All payments paid or returned should be reported on the institution reconciliation screen. Many schools are not using this screen, but it is required and will help you when reconciling your books at year end. Using the screen, you can easily confirm whether and when a payment was dispersed or returned to the commission. The first step is to search for the check to be returned by selecting Recipients per Claim Schedule in the search parameter. Once the payment record populates, simply input the date school paid student to report disbursements. And if returning a check back to the commission, input both the dollar amount being returned and the date. Our Chafee webpage provides information about the EFT process, such as the following. CSAC sends EFT notifications 2 days prior to deposits with a unique claim schedule number. Schools can look up claim schedules to determine which students were paid via the institution reconciliation screen in WebGrants. Schools can also search how to return funds via EFT, and then finally enroll in EFT. Finally, we'll round off this presentation with a few resources. There are many foster resources, but here are some of our favorites, such as the California Department of Social Services, California College Pathways, and John Burton Advocates for Youth. We want to give a special shout out for JBay for housing many useful information for our foster students, such as their education resources, housing providers, SB 150, and many more. Check out these fantastic resources and share them with your students. And finally, how can you help? First, ensure that you work the payment roster weekly to keep Chafee funds continually moved by withdrawing and recycling those funds to waitlisted students every week. Second, make sure students are also submitting a one-time Chafee application in addition to their yearly FAFSA or CADA. Third, host or participate virtual or in-person Cash for College workshops to assist students with their applications. And finally, fourth, refer your students to the various supports or resources available at your campuses, like tutoring services, foster youth liaison, extended opportunity program and services, rising scholars, and many more. And if you have any questions after this training, please reach out to the following contacts for any questions. And if you haven't done so already, please remember to subscribe to our listserv so you are up to date with any changes and deadlines. Thank you, and see you in the next video.